Yes, thanks for this very kind introduction, Ellen, and of course also thank you as host and host institution for having me here and giving me this opportunity to speak to you all, and of course also thank to you all for coming to see my talk on nature-based solutions to urban challenges to climate change. So I will talk today after a brief introduction about the concept of nature-based solutions, what it is, why we implement it, and how we do so. Then I will report of 2 case studies I pursued for my personal research in Tampere in Finland and Eindhoven in the Netherlands. I will conclude on them and then give an outlook, and together we may have a discussion on how this shows to be relevant also for this context, but this will be with your help, the discussion. So first of all, maybe I want to raise a question to the audience. So everybody who lives in a city may raise his or her hand. All right. Wonderful. So that's good to know. I can congratulate you. You are going with time. Urbanization is one of the major processes of our century. So people moving to cities. And it was 2017, actually, the year that more people lived in cities than in rural areas worldwide. And by 2030, it is projected that over 3/4 of the population will live in cities. So cities are really important. And now here, to quote United Nations, cities cover less than 2% of the Earth's surface, but consume 78% of the world's energy and produce more than 60% of greenhouse gas emissions. So the second part of this quote shows the second major process that shapes our century. So greenhouse gas emissions, so climate change. And cities have a, let's say, sort of ambivalent relation to climate change. So at one hand, they, as you just saw, they suffer from it, but they also work and amplify climate change due to the urban processes. I exemplarily stated one process here. So urban expansion usually comes with increased soil sealing, which results in less evaporation. Climate change results in higher overall temperatures and more extreme weather events. And this, in the end, so increased soil sealing, less evaporation, higher temperature, lead to what we know as urban heat islands, for example, deteriorating air quality, and, for example, an increased risk of flooding. And we do have technological approaches towards those issues. For example, urban heat islands could be air conditioning. We could cope with indoor air conditioning with the problem. Deteriorating air quality, we could install filtration, or deteriorating air quality due to mobility. We could introduce electric mobility to reduce emissions. And now the increased risk of flooding due to more extreme weather events, we could cope with an increase of drainage infrastructure. So all of those solutions are nice. It's good that we have them. Without them, we would be very desperate. But there are also other ways to approach the problem, and more integrative ways. As you can see, you have one problem, and the technological solution addresses exactly this problem. And so technology mostly provides single solution oriented solutions. So, and this is where the concept of nature-based solution comes into play. It's an umbrella term used for all nature-related urban interventions, which stand in clear contrast to what you just saw before, in clear contrast to traditional approaches. In the year 2015, it was put by the European Union and the European Commission on the EU research, on top of the EU research and innovation policy agenda for nature-based solutions and renaturing cities. And ever since then, major funds in research and development have been diverted into this concept, into development and into this concept, to actually as aim to put European Union at forefront of the development of this concept. So how does European Commission define nature-based solutions? So according to the European Commission, nature-based solutions are actions which are inspired by, supported by, or copied from nature to achieve reduced disaster risk, improved human well-being, and socially inclusive green growth. Now, this second part of the definition are very interesting, as they directly not only address technical questions, so for example, urban heat islands, but also social and societal problems and issues. So, as I said, the nature-based solutions is an umbrella term, and I brought this nice image thought up by Eisenberg in 2017, which really depicts nature-based solutions at the top as umbrella. Sitting over in the bottom layer, you can see overarching concepts and overarching domains. And nature-based solutions sitting at the top. So in a strategical way of thinking, nature-based solutions encompass ecosystem-based adaptation. In a sense of spatial planning, nature-based solutions include green infrastructure and blue infrastructure, so green water in the cities and green infrastructure in the cities. Now, these concepts are applied in the soft engineering domain, which responds, of course, in contrast to hard engineering, to the needs of green infrastructure and blue infrastructure. And here it's ecological engineering that has to be mentioned, and the so-called sustainable urban drainage systems. Now, performance is measured via the ecosystem services approach. And now I'm throwing all of these concepts at you, but you can see nature-based solutions tries to encompass all of those concepts that are already there and tries to include them in one holistic definition. And this can be, of course, criticized, but it also gives an opportunity, as the concept is very open, it is very inclusive, it is open not only to research, it is not only open to economic players, it is open to basically everybody can have their say and find their share in this concept. And it also allows that for any type of question, any type of issue you have in development, so to say, nevertheless, where the rain is coming from, so either if you need performance indicators, performance measuring, or a more strategical approach, you may find in this nature-based solutions concept an approach that suits your needs. And so it all boils down to the question. It is always possible with this concept to ask the question: is there a nature-based solution to my problem? And now, as Nature put it in their editorial of the year 2017, is nature-based solutions is the latest green jargon that means more than you might think. And they put it like this: so nature-based solutions sweep up ecosystem services, green-blue infrastructure, natural capital, and add concepts such as ecological engineering and ecosystem-based mitigation, and dump them into a policy-relevant pot where sustainable practices that harness the natural world can be devised, analyzed, and then pulled out for use by politicians, scholars, and researchers. So here you see how overarching this concept tries to be, and I would also follow the argumentation of Nature that it actually is an advantage of the concept. So, but enough on the conceptual. I will now give you some examples of what nature-based solutions are, and so they can be implemented on plot level, district level, and also on city level. And here on the x-axis you see the level of engineering involved. So here less engineering, there's more engineering and technology involved. So, for example, at the plot level, nature-based solutions could encompass urban meadow, then climbing plants over a house, our nature-based solution. Or here you see a green roof on top of a house, yeah, and then what is called permeable pavement, yeah, so basically pavement that lets water infiltrate but still gives stability for movement over ground. And then you have a combination of solar panels, or solar power, and green roof. And then this is maybe the most engineering-wise speaking, the most sophisticated solution by creating new urban ecosystems in this what is known as vertical forest in Finland. Yeah, and then on a district level, one could think of introducing new urban parks in between city districts, introducing community gardens for people to share, and and green spaces. On a city-wide level, one could think of connected green infrastructure along public transport lines, connected green streets, or of introducing urban forests inside settlements. So you see, there are many ways and many interventions qualify as nature-based solution. I forgot, here is the last one. Nature-based solutions could also be just the preservation and conservation of, for example, floodplains out at city borders. So when we think back now of our initial, the initial issues we face, we have all of those technological approaches, but now, as you saw, there are also nature-based approaches to address those issues. And the interesting thing now is that when you think back, the technological approaches always, for the most cases, work as single solution, and so straightforward addressing one single problem. And nature-based solutions provide multiple benefits at the same time. So when you put up a green roof, it does not only, for example, work as infiltration pathway for water and may decrease the risk of flooding, but it also works in the sense of reducing urban heat islands and may ameliorate air quality. So this is a major perk of this concept, that it addresses multiple issues at the same time. To give you a typology, we as institutions and actors, we live in a social system and we face societal and environmental challenges. And now we use the ecosystem, use and alter ecosystems through, for example, nature-based solutions, which themselves use ecosystem elements and structures, biodiversity, and ecosystem processes and functions to deliver, mediated through ecosystem services, possible solutions not only to our environmental challenges, but also to our societal challenges. And in the end, in the best way, serve human well-being. Yes, so this is important, not only addressing environmental, but only working inclusively. Now the big question is, how do we get those solutions on the ground? And this is where the concept of governance comes into play. So as there are institutions and actors involved, and technical solutions, and a multitude of decision-making processes and policy, it is now about the question of about asking the questions. How can I actually bring those can I implement those solutions on the ground? And so how are decisions made and implemented? And therefore, we need governance research to identify those processes and to then, in the end, identify possible ways of advancing and finding possible enablers for the implementation of those new solutions. All right. Now I will continue with my insight from my case study. So I was involved in a bigger research project, UNALab, Urban Nature Labs, which had the aim of facilitating the uptake of nature-based solutions in European cities. And within the research project, I pursued my own research in 2 cities, namely the city of Tampere in Finland and Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And yeah, so those cities face, as they are located more in Northern Europe, they face challenges regarding their urban water cycles. So I brought 2 images. They have flash floodings in the summer, for example, and their infrastructure, their great infrastructure and drainage system just cannot cope anymore with the processes and with the extreme weather events happening due to climate change. And then you see more and more of those pictures that streets are getting flooded and are not accessible anymore. So when you think back of this umbrella approach, I dedicated my research to these sustainable urban drainage systems, so to the water-related issues of nature-based solutions. And when you think, now I brought you 2 images of the traditional approach to urban drainage and to water management in the city. You have mainly piping systems put underground. And now the new approach, as you will see, is using natural elements. So the traditional solutions work like the other examples I gave before. They have a single purpose system. They are built up in engineered structures and therefore, of course, deliver only a limited role of ecosystem functions. Whereas on the other hand side, the nature-based solutions type of sustainable urban drainage systems, for short SUDS, they provide multiple benefit categories. I will expand on this later. They include or consist of natural elements, and in the end it boils down, they try to mimic natural water flows. And so here you see a sustainable urban drainage system in the city of Tampere. It is a major intervention in a district, so it is a retention pond, and basically in extreme weather events when large amounts of rain come in, the pond fills up and then afterwards lets water gradually infiltrate. And here you can also see the different benefit categories the whole thing provides. So besides its core function of working as water management structure, it provides biodiversity benefits. It provides amenities so people can sit there and enjoy the view, and of course by this it provides external health, indirect health benefits. So here you see 2 smaller interventions also from Tampere, a drainage soakway, and which is called rain garden. Yeah, and here you see the most basic form of sustainable urban drainage system in the municipality of Eindhoven, which is basically just taking out pavement, taking out asphalt at the right and the left-hand side of the street, and cultivating, cultivating plants on it. So basically greening measures. And here this is also an example of the municipality of Eindhoven. So before you have a 2-lane road, and now they introduce a new green stripe which works as infiltration area in the middle of the road. So when we now think of the traditional approaches, they, as being put underground, they have little interference with public space. Thus, they have little interference with stakeholders and can be managed in specialized structures and departments. Their goal is to work as invisibly as possible and to deliver water as invisibly as possible and as fast as possible out of the city to storage facilities or treatment facilities, for example. And yes, So the department, for example, dealing with those traditional solutions doesn't have to talk much with other stakeholders. Now the new solutions, they do interfere, as being placed above ground, they do interfere with public space. They interfere with a lot of different stakeholders, and thus they require those stakeholders to work together. And so they cannot be managed in those specialized structures and departments, but need collaboration between the affected stakeholders. And and just to give you an insight what governance factors shape and influence the success of the implementation of these processes, I brought an example of the OECD framework on water governance, and they divide the governance factors up in effectiveness, efficiency, and trust and engagement. And I will not go into detail on all of those, but so on all of those, in those categories, you'll find governance factors that work either in a prohibiting way or in an enabling way for the uptake of those new solutions. So, of course, there's financing. You need financing. You need regulatory frameworks in place, and this is a very interesting point. So you need innovative governance to enable these collaborative processes. Yes, I won't go into detail into the other ones. I will advance with insights from the case studies. So my case studies were in the field of governance, and that's how I got to my research questions of how did the municipalities of Tampere and Eindhoven integrate SOTs into their urban development projects? Why did they do so? And what barriers and which enablers did they perceive on the way? The method I applied, so I used academic and media and lay literature, and then conducted semi-structured expert interviews, which were of merited a qualitative research approach. They were open-ended, exploratory, and inductive. I used this for data collection, then defined the context. To define the context, map the actors and map the institutions, and then, of course, in the very end, identify governance barriers and enablers. These were then fed back to my interview partners and to literature to actually verify if the results were correct. So, results. How and why did they pursue the new solutions? In Tampere, it is very interesting. It was a local uprising by dwellers that triggered a demand for the new solutions. So local citizens were concerned about the water quality in a certain area, in a certain lake, and so they demanded the municipality to overthink development projects, and the municipality responded and took up this this notion and imported international concepts of sustainable drainage or of nature-based solutions, and to help the municipal officials and the municipal water management workers. The development today is very much captured by experts, so experts belonging to this water management sector. And this is due to water management was always, in the traditional sense, placed in one department. And nowadays, it's also this department that takes care of the new solutions, and the development and around the new solutions very much kept inside this network of experts. They have, in Tampere, they have 2 dedicated districts, new district developments, where they place those new solutions. And yes, Eindhoven, the situation is...
Sorry, in the case of Tampere,
yeah.
The uprising that you call it, it's like people protesting, complaining. What was it?
Yeah, yes.
Just complaints going to the city office.
Yes, they were. No, there were real protests, and so the city issued development plans for a new area, and people saw it, and they were getting really concerned that, especially about local trees, local forests, and especially about water quality in a certain area. So they.
It was in response to new development.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. Yes, in Eindhoven it was very different, the situation. So the Netherlands in general, they have a long history in water management with many different institutions involved on all different scales of state management. And there it was no uprising, but it were the experts themselves working for the municipality that foresaw a need for new solutions and a new way to cope with water. Together, they received large support from politics, and together with politics, they shaped innovative co-working and innovative co-creation practices. And nowadays, the new solutions are, to a large extent, already integrated in mainstream. So, for example, the innovative co-working they implemented was restructuring of the whole municipal administration to become from a hierarchical structure to what they call organizational web. I can expand further on this later. And innovative co-creation, the city pays an active citizen, which is called spokesperson, that collects all the notions from all different NGOs and civil society activities, and tries to integrate those notions into development plans. And since they employed this innovative co-creation process, they basically do not receive any lawsuits anymore. So, so to give you a graphical depiction, in Tampere you have this this expert network inside the municipality, and they, together with two local companies, they create the demand for the new solutions. Hello. And the demand is then satisfied in those two special dedicated districts. But besides this demand for the new solutions, there's a mainstream city development that is still pursuing in, let's say, old ways. And it is pretty much located around this expert network. In Eindhoven now, the situation is very different. You have of course, also a dense expert network with one, this is why this spot is so big, with one personality who was described by many persons as so-called change agent, who is constantly advocating. He's very well connected in city networks and constantly advocating for those new solutions. And he has gathered his staff, informed staff around him. They receive support by politicians. They have a lot of local companies on site, and also not only scientific but regional and national institutions support their endeavor. So here the new solutions made it already to a large extent in mainstream demand of the city. But as you can see in both examples, demand is created by public actors, and until now, not really private actors involved in the development. Which brings me to my last research question, so what barriers, which enablers can be found? So to begin with the enablers, Tampere, the municipality is growing, they have good economic situation, then municipality owns most ground, and so they are actually in a favorable position to demand from developers to incorporate those new solutions. Those two special districts they implemented, they allow for experimenting and allow for learning, also for the municipality to take place, and they receive support by science. In Eindhoven is also the economic situation, so after economic crisis in 2008, the development sped up, and there's a lot of construction and a lot of development happening. They have those innovative co-creating and co-working systems in place. then they have this dense informal network, which is at in so many levels, in so many connection points, advocating for those new solutions. It is very much a personal commitment by the people involved that drives this whole process. And then of course, they receive support by politicians and by science. In general, as enablers, local guidelines, also in the local language, so in Dutch or in Finnish, they helped the take-up of those new solutions. Then what experts mention often was that an overall vision and the strategy for everybody to see and to imagine where things should go or are going enable an uptake of the new solutions. And of course, as in all development projects, funding is a question. So, and as you saw, it is basically public funding that goes into these new solutions. Barriers in Tampere, experts told me that there is basically this vision. There's a lack of vision. So you have this experimenting districts, and there they try out new things, but the overall vision on city development is not in line with nature-based solutions. Those new approaches are exclusively or mostly exclusively put into those districts and are not tried out in different settings. And then people reported that they are used for branding purposes. So in city brochures or advertising material, they use those new solutions to advertise the city as innovative, progressive, and green. But at the same time, there's this mainstream city development happening. Eindhoven experts reported that there are often compromises made to the detriment of the new solutions. So, for example, when they negotiate the city development plan, the width of a cycling lane, the width of a car lane, these are all things exactly regulated, and there's but so far there's no regulation for green space or green stripes or yes. And they also reported that development is very much coming out of a middle organizational layer of the municipality. So those experts working in middle range positions, and that the higher strategic layer has not taken up these new solutions. In general, when barriers to the uptake are that what can be found here, that they are not at all regulated. So the private sector is not keen on taking up the new solutions because it's nor incentivized nor coercively put on the private sector. And by private sector, I mean private house owners and also developing companies. And then it is still up to today, the ecosystem services approach is debated, and for budgeting schemes, budgeting schemes are unable to capture all benefits which are provided by the new solutions. So, for example, this was the case in Eindhoven. They reported a parking lot brings in €20,000 a year, but when you clear this parking space to create some green space, you not only lose those €20,000 in budgeting, but also create new costs due to maintenance. So the benefits, health-wise or air quality-wise, just cannot be incorporated. Then the exclusiveness to expert networks, and this is due to which is called path dependency and silo thinking. So the structures around water management, where those new solutions are now located, they developed around these traditional approaches, and therefore they traditionally do not have many connections to, let's say, other departments located in city administration. And so silo thinking is happening, that people are not looking left and right, and therefore those yeah, new solutions get stuck somewhat in those expert networks. And yeah, but for the new solutions to provide all of those benefits, it is necessary to include the different stakeholders that everybody, yeah, yes. So, and now just very briefly, I wanted to set this into a broader theoretical context, context of multi-level perspective. And this is a concept to describe changes in our, major changes in our socio-technical regimes. And this is a concept thought up by Gales in 2002, and a very important concept for the transitions community and the transition science community. So basically what he did, he divided our socio-technical system into three different major layers. On the bottom layer you see technological niches, in the middle layer you see socio-technical regimes, and overarching landscape developments. So landscape developments would be, for example, urbanization and climate change. So overarching processes you cannot really interfere with from the bottom ground. And the regime is the world as we have it right now. So a somewhat stable and very path-dependent system relying on the inventions that are there. And now on the bottom you have this niche development, and this is also where nature-based solutions are located. They are still somewhat a niche concept, and it is not overall, they have not been overall taken up by, so to say, regime actors, but they receive support from regime actors being state and public, yes, European Union, for example. So this, I just wanted to give you a short insight on, yeah, on the thoughts this transition science community uses, the framework the transition science community uses to explain major changes and major disruptions. And now this, it is debatable and it's still under discussion how this concept is applied to nature-based solutions. But yeah, yes, we are still at the very beginning of the development. This is still a quite new concept. But the main point and wrap up and outlook I want to make is that what you saw, nature-based solutions imply far-reaching organizational changes, even frontrunners. So Tampere and Eindhoven, as being really progressive and front-running cities, struggle with the uptake. We need a combined effort for those solutions to take up. And of course, as I said, integrated approaches as they are cross-sectoral. So, but it is time to act now, because if you think of lifespan of public infrastructure, if you don't implement the solutions now, or if you don't change something now, the next chance might be, might take 30 years or so to come. So nature-based solutions actually demand for a shift in mindset. It is not, it is about collaborating, and it's not about single disciplines. It is about transdisciplinary work. It is not about working in compartments, in silos. It is in thinking about non-compartmentalization. And yes, it is about, so not single solutions to one problem. It is about creating a broader vision for how a more holistic image of future should look like, and about implementing co-working and co-creation processes. And in the end, one could be rewarded by breaking up lock-ins and breaking up path-dependent structures, and in the sense of the multi-level perspective, by moving this holistic and sustainable approach more towards a regime. So, the concept itself provides a first integrative step to enable experimenting and learning for a far further reaching change of our city development. All right, and just a quick outlook on, so I collected some grants that were issued by the European Union, and to show how important this, this concept is. We have here one grant, strengthening international cooperations on sustainable urbanization, nature-based solutions for restoration and rehabilitation of urban ecosystem. It's already closed, but this one, visionary and integrated solutions to improve well-being and health in cities, also addressing nature-based solutions, closed. Another one, transforming historic urban areas into hubs of entrepreneurship and social and cultural integration, also addressing nature-based solutions. Now there's one still open, multi-stakeholder dialogue platform to promote nature-based solutions to societal challenges. So, as you see, these were just the calls of this year, but in this research field, but they all somewhat address nature-based solutions. And the funding, in accumulated funding of 2008 to 2017 was 113 million, and 2008 till 2020 160 million euro, which went in research on nature-based solutions. And so by the jump in those last 3 years, you can see how important this topic got. But now you may ask, all right, where is Yerevan and where's Armenia in this? So the Federal Ministry of Education and Research of the German state issued a call to support applications for this, for these European research projects. So this call is Bridge to European Research Area, and EAP means Eastern Partnership, and yeah, Armenia is yes, in the call. So yeah, be updated. Maybe you will hear something on nature-based solutions in Armenia and European projects in the future. But thank you. This was my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Any questions?
Yes.
What are the pitfalls of NDS forward?
Yes, I mean, first of all, it is very, you could introduce new problems regarding those nature-based solutions. So when they are poorly, when you don't have this collaborative planning, for example, there were some in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven, in one case study, some solutions that in the end didn't work out because technicians, people really understanding the technical processes, were not involved in an early stage of planning, and then in the end those solutions failed. So for example, they implemented drainage systems, but they didn't drain the water properly. The water stayed there. It stayed there, and in the end they had a mosquito plague, and people living there complained, and that of course leads to a drawback of those of the implementation. So it is really at the core that you involve all the different stakeholders for them to provide the benefits you want and for them to be a success. So because yeah, depending on level of engineering, but it's not. They may look very simple, but there's a lot of thinking that has to go in there.
How can you financially incentivize stakeholders to actually commit to nature-based solutions?
Yeah, I mean, yes, as you saw, until now, only on the demand side is only public money, so to say. And now there are a lot of different incentivizing schemes. So either you give, for example, tax reductions if someone puts a green roof on top of his house, or you give some other sorts of rewards to those people, or you, of course, yes, so incentivizing financially through tax reductions could be one approach. And yeah.
So one thing silos do really well is you have a controlled budget, you do controlled planning, you can fire people, you can hold people accountable. In this system, it gets a little bit complicated. Who pays for it? Who maintains it? Who is responsible for the drainage? Did you look at the financial sort of aspects of how these things are planned and implemented and the governance of who eventually is responsible?
Yes, so I mean so far in the 2 case studies, it were public actors responsible from A to Z for the maintenance of public structure. But I just recall there were, of course, also private companies developing those solutions. And yes, and actually the thing is that for those sustainable urban drainage systems, the cost calculation shows that expanding the traditional drainage system so that it can cope with those incoming extreme weather events and the projected higher rainfall that comes in, it would be much more costly to dig up all the sewer system, get the old pipes out, move new pipes in, than introducing and paying for the maintenance for those supporting green structures. And yes, but of course this is a problem in budgeting schemes, as you have costs. Those new systems, they pop up as you need to set them up, and then you have a constant flow of cash to maintain them. And yes, this is a problem of budgeting schemes. So, and yeah, many people complain that actually they should reword budgeting to depict life cycle costing of the whole system, so that actually also in budgeting tables the disadvantage shows up to be true. Yeah, and of course when you think now of which is not done, so mostly the connection to a social agenda or a health agenda is not done, and it's very hard to measure monetarily the health benefits of a meadow or a tree that is put in place, but there certainly are those positive effects, but it's just very hard to measure them in economic terms. Yeah. So they pay off.
I was carefully listening to your presentation, and at first the term you've introduced seems to me very promising, but when I think deeply, I realized that the concept behind this term is not entirely new. For instance, I have never heard a word even you pronounce for a single time like climate change adaptation. But most of the activities are clearly qualifying for those measures. And the second important aspect which I would like to highlight is related to the fact that many new aspects and concepts which are rising gradually and supported by different action groups needs to be carefully studied first to identify any pros and cons, and because sometimes they might have some very positive aspects in a very narrow sector, but when you look at the same problem holistically, then you identify that in some cases disadvantages are much overweight the expected positive impacts. So in this case, the priorities and the cases for different cities also are quite different. Many cities in Northern Europe may experience such a climatic impacts which are clearly irrelevant in countries like Armenia, when the rainfall is not expected for instance, to be to such an extent to flood the street and other areas. And also, I realized that the much of the conflicts arising in urban areas is really related to land use planning perspectives, because it is create a lot of tension among the groups, which are some of them environmentally oriented, others pay attention more to economic aspects, economic development. Others are interested in urban infrastructure development and so on. So the interests are so many, so diverse. So it's not easily possible to find a compromise and total agreement for everyone to introduce new concepts, especially when they are not even well tested in countries, in other countries, but specifically in the country, host country. I mean, and of course, definitely there is some potential to use these type of techniques, but they need to be carefully studied before starting the implementation process and funding these activities and lobbying for such actions.
Yes. Thank you.
Is there any measure to human comfort about the changes? Because you said people are rioting or, I don't know, complaining. There is one, like in Eindhoven, there is one that is in Lund for a few decades at least, maybe more, but at least that's what I know. Kind of nice when it's in the winter, terrible in the summer because of mosquitoes again.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something odd, you know, people did it without scientists telling them. And it's terrible to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And because the city is increasing and they move the new neighborhoods there, it's, I mean, you breathe more insecticides in your house because you don't want to be bitten by mosquitoes, then you get an effect by sitting next to that mosquito hub, which is exactly what you said. So is there any measure of comfort included in the, I don't know, questionnaires, or like how people feel living in that big building in Milan?
Mm-hmm.
Or I used to live in an underground house in Israel. It was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
As much energy you would save, I prefer paying.
Yeah.
You understand? So is it, this is the only way people will accept it, right?
Yes, I'm pretty sure there is a measurement, and directly responding from the case study in Eindhoven, so to promote and advocate for those new solutions, they also switched terminology. So not speaking anymore of climate change adaptation, but more speaking about livability of the city.
Okay.
So this is clearly a main point. And to refer to your comment, thank you very much. Yes, of course it is true. One has to carefully assess what they do, how they work. And as I said, in order for them to deliver all of the promises that not only I made in this presentation, but all the promises the concept makes, yeah, one has to work together and incorporate all of those different meanings, opinions, and yes, and in the end find a compromise. And yes, but it is about the learning processes, and so there are solutions, for example, for the water. But urban green also has these other co-benefits, for example, of temperature and of air quality improvement, of temperature reduction. So it is not only about, yes, water cycles. Yes, Alan.
Just, picking up on something that Chris said and also some of the comments that we made, bureaucracies love clarity, separation, very limited. So it's very hard to introduce a new, within the governance systems you have in most cities, this kind of collaborative, bringing different experts together. It's a change, it's a systems change problem that you have. And then you have non-expert input, you have expert input. It's kind of managing that process becomes an expertise in and of itself, right? So given that, you know, you have a park department, you have a street, roads department in the city, now you're asking them to bring and introduce a stormwater drainage component into their facility. And they're supposed to manage it, or not? Do they share with storm management department people. And how, and this is institutional change we're also talking about, and the change of way of thinking that has been probably there for a good century, right? In many cities, older cities. Bureaucracies are very resistant to that kind of change because it adds complexity to their life. And they just need their performance measures. They're, this is what they did, this is how many kilometers of pipes they put, this is how much, how fast the water moves out. So I think a lot of these nature-based solutions, there's definitely a promise there, of better, improved quality of life, lower cost, but there's an upfront investment in systems management, complex systems management, I think. That also, I think, it's very good that these experiments are happening because you're building that complex system slowly. And you're trying to see if it works or doesn't work, what works, what doesn't work, what, So, I think this is, that's one aspect of it, that increased complexity of management is, I think, something we need to become more and more used to. And we're not simple, the world isn't becoming simpler, it's becoming more complex. And ability to manage complexity, I think, is a requirement for a lot of, especially growing cities. I'm not talking about dying cities, they have another issue. But that's one aspect. The other aspect of it, I think that maybe, this was not the point of your presentation, I understand, but at some point I think that if EU is pushing for this agenda of nature-based solutions, they've done some analysis, I hope, that showed economically there's an economic cost-benefit analysis where this actually is more beneficial in the long term than costly. The traditional infrastructure investments are very costly, but people know how to do them. So there's no cost of transition, right? But here with nature-based solutions, the promise is that you're going to reduce operational costs, you're going to reduce capital investment costs up front, but you have to learn how to do it. And there's expertise. They're also very expert intensive. Whereas with, you already have the expertise on the way with the civil engineering work that needs to be done. So I think, and maybe a recommendation, I don't know, to you, or maybe at some point it would be also interesting to add, what is this kind of economic calculus of why go towards nature-based solutions? And that was mentioned, and some of these are not new. I mean, Olmsted in the 19th, 20th century, beginning of the 20th and end of 19th century, did fantastic nature-based solutions with parks and water systems in U.S. cities, in New York, in Boston, and yes, places. So I mean, some of these solutions have been around a long time. It's just sometimes it was forced engineering solutions were simpler and quicker to get through. And Los Angeles now, for instance, is dealing with, a drop of rainwater hits Los Angeles 20 kilometers away from the coast. It takes it half an hour to get into the ocean. It's so efficient. Water removal is so efficient. But then Los Angeles has a water problem, a water shortage problem. So the question of how you retain water where you need it, that's also part of the issue. Right? So it's not always excessive water. Sometimes you don't have enough water, but you have enough rainwater to meet all your needs, right? Except you don't capture it somehow. So the part of these solutions are also meant to capture and store water where you're going to eventually need it. And Yerevan, for instance, is a low precipitation city overall. We do have flash floods. We've increasingly having flash floods. But also we have shortage of water. How do you retain mostly in soil moisture, and so retain soil moisture, high soil moisture? How do you keep it in place and not very quickly get it to the Horazangorn and let it go into the Arts River? So these are also, the issue of, the overall rationale and kind of the big calculus why this is worth pursuing. It may be worth also to present that to us at some point.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the comment, Alan. Yes, I maybe missed that point about water, retaining water. Of course, also the new solutions are about valuing water, actually, keeping it where it falls, as the traditional solution, as you just said, it is about getting rid of the water, getting it out of the areas where people live. But the new is lets water infiltrate and yeah, usage on site. And yes, the overall calculus is, of course, it's a very interesting point. I just remember that New York City, they receive their drinking water via natural reserve, and so water quality was declining, and then there was the question of putting in place new filtration plants, new new treatment plants, and actually it showed that the costs of renaturation were initially also very high, but in the long run, the operational costs of those treatment plants were higher than what actually the functioning ecosystem delivers. So yes, and this is of course the rationale behind also this research agenda. But yes, I didn't include a slide.
It's very exciting. This is another step in, as I was mentioning, increasingly complex systems, very kind of knowledge-intensive systems. I mean, we're trying to mimic natural processes, and civil engineering simplifies the process in many ways. Reduces the complexity of the system. Whereas now with natural systems, we're adding, you need to understand that system much more intensively. So that's a good future for our biologists and biochemists.
That's the problem, we don't understand nature at all.
Yeah.
You might understand 2 cycles, 3 if you are genius, but that's it. And so you always make a mistake over a mistake. And my feeling is people came out of villages to the cities to run away from certain parts of the nature, which we might bring back. That's why I asked about the comfort. You know, like, where is this thin line of how climate friendly I am and how many mosquitoes I want to deal with. As an example, mosquitoes. And the same situation was with deserts. Your solution looks very green to me, very Northern European.
Yes.
And if you talk about desert, where I lived for like 9 years of my life, then if you bring these trees, you are ruining their nature. And the Israeli and Jordanian environmentalists and Palestinians, they would hate you putting trees there. They hate the palm trees. They do hate the palm trees because you are killing the nature, which are snakes and scorpions, which we are not used to. So their nature solution is literally a flood. Once a
But
year.
they also have water harvesting. I mean, they're thinking about how to capture the water that comes and use it.
Yeah, but then if you capture this water, then you don't have your desert blooming. You know, there's a lot of questions. They went underground, housing, green roofs, none of them worked. It's very uncomfortable because you live with scorpions still underground. So this looks very nice to me, and this is something that can work for Yerevan for sure. But the closer to the equator you go, the harder it's going to become, because then either you change the nature and make it some European-wise, which is water-intensive, you know. And Yerevan has areas where we collect the stormwater in Kanaker for sure. I can show you if you want to. That's like traditional, exactly what you put in Eindhoven. It's happening there, and it goes to the irrigation channel, and the private houses get this water to irrigate their houses. So you never have flood in these high areas. And historically.
Interesting.
That'd be good to, I don't know where those are. It'd be good to know.
They covered some of it, but next to Russian army base it's open. So
we had a very natural, very important natural waterway, Yerevan, which was going through, coming from north, high elevations, going through and ending up in the Russian River. And they covered that on the road going over the town. And actually after that, there was a lot of disruptions in the flood drainage in the city. And a lot of cities now are opening up their old waterways. They're reopening them. So my dream is that one day we'll reopen Yerevan.
It's an interesting insight. Yeah, and
But you have to go, I mean, it's like still water. There's lots of water going through that. It's just underground now. It's not open.
Yes, in Eindhoven they reopened, daylighted a river that was put underground in the 1950s. Yes, and it brings a lot of advantages, but of course also new issues to maybe deal with and to answer to this complexity systems common of yours. So in Eindhoven it took almost 10 years they had this structural reform, and now 10 years passed, and of course one can now, let's say, harvest the fruits of this reform, but it took a long time to exactly implement those learning processes you mentioned, to people to find themselves again in those new ways of working together. And yes, they completely changed this siloed structure, and of course when you are used to something for 20, 30 years, it's very hard. It's very hard to overcome. But this is what actually this new concept promises, to break up paths and to be able to provide a step forward to move beyond locked in pathways.
My sense in Yerevan, the most complex part would be the social, political part. It will not be the technological. It will be getting people to understand, to work together, and people actually to participate. Because most often, people think like a city hall just solved the problem. Why are you talking to me? This whole process of public participating in decision making, multiple experts working together to solve problems, it's going to require some convincing. I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong. You guys correct me. I don't know.
To think more about this kind of problems, especially youth. So I think it would be easier for us to understand and to see the differences of such kind of solutions.
I think one solution can be really good modeling and visualization of different solutions. This is where convincing more. And of course, actually, so people really know what's the benefit.
And certainly if you put the costs, putting underground pipes in Eindhoven would be the multiple factors, and it would probably be 5-6 times more expensive. It's just that's done within a department, someone does it, they get a budget allocation, they do it, no one sees it, and it goes, right? Whereas this other one, especially if people participate now, they know more about it.
Implementing the pipelines is not a cheap process to implement, so it's just international balances and then measures the amount of work spending and public awareness.
I think this comparative choice are very important. There's a lot of the arguments behind this is cost, reducing costs. Not only increasing quality of life, it's also all the infrastructure is very expensive, especially in a growing city, and with many. The expectation by 2100, you're going to have cities that are 70 million in size. That's the scale of that is massive. You can't hold the technology.
Yes, that's it. It's just too costly. Further expanding, just not viable. There's a really interesting assessment by the city of Copenhagen, because they citywide implemented those new solutions, and they did in-depth calculations on how to adapt to the projected weather events due to climate change, and it was just not feasible using traditional approaches. So of course this is behind the driver behind it.
But in the case to facilitate the implementation of the project, it's crucial, I guess, to have a wider support of the public. So if you identify any areas which are truly concerned by people, by majority of, for example, city dwellers, in case of Armenia, it might be, for example, the expansion or conservation of green areas, parks, rehabilitation of degraded areas, and also for the future, maybe enlarging areas specifically which are going to be used for recreation and some other activities, but by the way, which is also has a component for ecosystem conservation, very strong impact from the support from the social component, because people usually they don't really find any good areas which are provide some microclimate, or especially during the summer period in Yerevan area, and to establish such a specific areas and their future development may be very positive support from the inhabitants. Do you consider among your recommendations and the possibility for funding this type of activities, or it is clearly restricted to sewage and drainage activities?
Thank you very much for this comment. Yes, due to limited time, I missed very much a lot on this point, but of course it is a big driver also behind this these new solutions are enhancing social structures in the city. And for example, whereas the more wealthy part of the population can afford having air conditioning, indoor air conditioning, the poorer parts of the population cannot. And for them, you maybe need an urban park to bear the developments projected to happen with climate change. So it is essentially delivering services to the population that the part of the population that really needs them. And speaking of district development, when you think of a park as a place where meetings happen, where neighbors meet and talk to each other, it of course, in the sense of its definition, works. The new solutions work enhancing the low district social networks and social cohesion of local districts. So yes, a great part of this concept are social concerns. Thanks for the comment. Yes.
Do you guys know of any, I mean, Natala mentioned the conductor example of water. Do you know of anything else that resembles, because in the Soviet period they experimented with stuff, and you know, you might have, we might already have infrastructure in place that resembles some kind of a solution like that. You know, I think some of our parks are definitely playing that role, buffering. I don't know, if you know of it, it'd be good to collect what we already have and build on that, and think about building on that.
But Yerevan is also a heavily transformed city, because this is supposed to be arid area. We are not supposed to have trees either. So
Well,
a lot of things you see is also new thing for the area. Even like 100 years maybe, or less even. It wasn't like
Kamanian's
this.
idea was to put like double treat, triple treat streets because of the dust control and all that.
Yeah.
But also, it's kind of, it's a bowl system, right? This is a, Yerevan is a bowl, basically, an open bowl, and then the other is a flat coast. And those trees that were planted and that were cut about 20, 30 years ago, provided a very critical function for the city's coolness and dust level. Those are also some of the areas. Yerevan wants to go in that direction. This ring forest, urban forest, is going to be a very important part, I think, of the emissions and the water retention.
I also remember when I was a kid, which was long ago, they tried on 9th floor panel buildings, they tried the green roofs, basically trees, and eventually these humic acids started degrading the roof, and they took it out, and I could see it from my house, from my parents' house. So Soviet Union experiment, it didn't work out. This was 80s, around like mid-80s, but they tried. And then 20 years later, I saw it in Israel, and they also had exactly the same problem, which is like we don't know how to read other nations' literature
Yes.
situation. They had exactly the same. Tel Aviv did it, and so maybe there is some new materials because engineers work still, right? And there are new materials that could actually help to overcome this. But that was
Green
another
roofs
thing.
right now are they're using different.
Yeah, exactly.
The water drainage is managed, so it doesn't impact the building.
Yeah, so there were a lot of trials here.
Yes, and this is what is also the outcome of all of those research projects. Of course, there are also technical questions addressed. Yes, maybe they even reproduced the example we were just telling from the 80s. The test that was did here, maybe they even reproduced it now in Europe to see if it works out. Yes.
So it is part of your task to do a kind of proposal for the submission to this funding.
This would be my personal interest, yeah, to develop a proposition to this funding scheme, yes. Yeah, it is not, I'm not told, but it is would be interesting for me to work on this issue, also in this context of Yerevan, yeah.
Yerevan is interesting because it's so different in its decision-making governance process. And in many ways, it's very typical of post-Soviet kind of context, but it's also not. Northern Europe is very different universe, right?
Yes.
So I think it would be interesting to try something in Yerevan and see. Hopefully learn something.
I think one of the solutions to the transition to the NBS-based infrastructure could be NBICS technologies. And NBICS means nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technologies, cognitive technologies, and sociology. First of all, biotechnology. I mean gene-engineered, for example, plants which need less water in comparison with traditional plants and trees. Pipelines made by the use of AI nanotechnology, which more cost-effective, and they need less money to be constructed. For example, I think in the future it could be possible to use NBICS technologies for the transition of NBICS-based infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. Of course, yeah, these solutions are not about moving backwards. In some sense, it is, of course, they're employing also new technological innovations that couldn't be thought of in the past, yeah? So, although those interventions may look, let's say, just bringing back nature, bringing back old ways of managing, they're not, of course, we also need new technological inventions, and then why not? Yes, in BICS, yes. Thanks for the comment.
Are we happy? Okay, everyone, thank you very much. Again.
Thank you for listening and for being here. Yeah.